My name was Abigail, and for me, Christmas was never about the shiny, expensive things. It was about making something with my hands, about creating beauty from nothing but clay and time and patience. My family did not understand that. My mother especially. She loved store-bought presents, the kind that came in glossy bags from expensive stores with names you had to pronounce carefully. Designer labels. Brand names. Things that announced their value before you even opened them. My brother, Peter, was the same way. He bought tech gadgets and luxury items and made sure everyone knew exactly how much he had spent. But me? I found my peace in pottery. In the quiet hum of the wheel. In the way clay felt cool and smooth under my fingers. In the slow, meditative process of shaping something beautiful from earth and water. To my mother, it was just a silly hobby. Something I did to pass the time because I did not have a real creative outlet. She worked in marketing, valued flash and presentation. My pottery was too quiet for her. Too humble. Too handmade. But I loved it anyway. It was mine. And that year, I decided to make her something special. I had been working with clay for 3 years by then, taking classes at the community center, practicing in my small apartment studio I had set up in the corner of my bedroom. I was not a professional. I was just someone who loved the feel of creating something. That fall, I started working on a vase for my mother. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted her to see what I could do, to understand that this was not just a hobby. This was art. I spent months on it. I threw the basic shape on the wheel at least a dozen times before I got it right. Tall and elegant, with a slight curve at the neck. Then I carved delicate snowflakes into the surface, tiny spirals that caught the light. I mixed a custom glaze, sea green with hints of silver, that reminded me of winter mornings. I fired it twice, holding my breath both times, praying it would not crack. When it finally came out of the kiln, perfect and whole and beautiful, I actually cried. This was the best thing I had ever made. And I made it for her. I wrapped it carefully in layers of tissue paper, placed it in a nice box, and could not wait for Christmas morning. Christmas at our house was always loud and chaotic. My mother hosted every year, and she made it an event. The decorations were magazine perfect. The food was catered. The presents piled under the tree in neat, color-coordinated stacks. My mother loved the performance of Christmas, the way it looked, the way she could post photos and show everyone how perfect our family was. I arrived early that morning to help set up, my carefully wrapped vase tucked under my arm. Peter showed up late, as always, carrying bags from expensive stores. We exchanged the usual hugs and small talk. Then came the gift exchange. My mother opened presents with theatrical enthusiasm, exclaiming over each one. Designer scarves. Expensive perfume. A leather handbag that probably cost more than my rent. Then she got to mine. I watched her face as she carefully unwrapped the tissue paper, as she lifted the vase out of the box. For a moment, I thought I saw something. Surprise maybe. Or appreciation. But then her expression settled into something else. Something polite and distant. How quaint, she said, her voice bright but empty. Did you make this yourself? I nodded, unable to speak. She set it down on the coffee table. Well, it is very sweet, Abby. Thank you. Sweet. Like I was a child who had made a macaroni necklace. The vase sat on the coffee table for the rest of Christmas Day. My mother did not mention it again. She did not ask about the process or the glaze or how long it took. She just moved on to the next gift, the next conversation, the next performance. I tried not to let it hurt. I told myself she was just distracted, that she would appreciate it more later. But deep down, I knew. She did not see the value in it. She did not see the hours of work or the love I had poured into every snowflake. She just saw homemade. Amateur. Not good enough. When I left that evening, the vase was still sitting on the coffee table, surrounded by empty wrapping paper and ribbon. I did not see it again. The next time I visited my mother's house, it was gone. I looked for it subtly, checking her shelves, her cabinets, the places she usually displayed things. Nothing. "Where is the vase I made you?" I finally asked, trying to sound casual. She waved her hand vaguely. "Oh, I put it away somewhere safe. You know how crowded my shelves are." But I knew what that meant. It was in a cupboard somewhere, hidden away, forgotten. My heart broke a little more. But I did not say anything. I just smiled and changed the subject. The rest of that year passed slowly. I kept making pottery because I loved it, but something had shifted. The joy felt muted. I kept thinking about that vase, about the way my mother had dismissed it so casually. I started working extra hours at my day job, a boring but stable position at the local town planning office. I filed permits. I answered phones. I helped small business owners navigate zoning regulations and licensing requirements. It was not exciting, but it paid the bills and left my evenings free for pottery. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, I had almost convinced myself I was over it. Almost. My mother hosted the family gathering again, same as always. Same perfect decorations. Same catered food. Same piles of expensive presents. I brought a gift card that year, something safe and impersonal. I was not going to make the mistake of putting my heart into a gift again. The gift exchange started the same way it always did. My mother opened presents with exaggerated delight. Then it was my turn. My brother, Peter, handed me a poorly wrapped box, laughing. "This one is from Santa's rejected pile," he joked. I smiled politely and started unwrapping it. And then my entire world stopped. Inside the box was my vase. My sea green vase with the carved snowflakes. The one I had spent months making. The one I had given my mother exactly 1 year ago. I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. There was even a note card tucked inside. I pulled it out with shaking hands. In my mother's handwriting, it said, "Thought you would appreciate this more. Enjoy." The room around me faded into white noise. I could hear my family laughing and talking, but it sounded distant, like I was underwater. My mother had regifted my handmade present back to me. She had taken the thing I made for her with my own hands, the thing I poured my heart into, and given it back to me like it was a generic gift she did not want. Like it was clutter she needed to get rid of. I looked up. My mother was watching me, smiling expectantly, waiting for me to thank her. "Do you like it?" she asked brightly. "I thought it would look nice in your apartment. You know, with your whole artsy thing." My whole artsy thing. Like my pottery was a phase. A quirk. Something amusing, but ultimately meaningless. I forced a smile. "Thank you," I managed to say. "It is perfect." I rewrapped the vase carefully and held it for the rest of the gift exchange, my hands numb. I left my mother's house as soon as I could politely escape. I drove home in silence, the vase sitting on the passenger seat beside me. When I got to my apartment, I set it on my kitchen table and just stared at it. The hurt was overwhelming. Not just the regifting itself, though that was bad enough, but the casual cruelty of it. The complete lack of awareness that she had done anything wrong. She genuinely thought she was being thoughtful, giving me back something that suited my style. Like I was a child who needed toys that matched my interests. I sat there for hours, just looking at that vase. At the snowflakes I had carved so carefully. At the glaze that had taken me weeks to perfect. And slowly, the hurt started to transform into something else. Something cold and hard and focused. Determination. I was not going to let her dismiss me anymore. I was not going to keep being the daughter whose gifts got hidden away or regifted. I was going to prove that my silly hobby was worth something. Not to her. I did not need her approval anymore, but to myself and to the world. The next morning, I went to work with a new sense of purpose. I sat at my desk in the town planning office, looking at the stacks of permit applications and business licenses I processed every day. I had helped dozens of people start small businesses. I knew the forms. I knew the requirements. I knew exactly how to register a business and set up an online shop. Why had I never done it for myself? Because my mother's voice was always in my head, telling me it was just a hobby. That real artists went to fancy schools and had gallery shows. That handmade things were quaint, not valuable. But I was done listening to that voice. During my lunch break, I pulled up the business registration forms on my computer. I filled them out carefully, officially registering Found and Formed Pottery as a small business. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. By the end of the day, I had submitted everything. I was officially a business owner, even if I was the only one who knew it yet. That evening, I went home and set up an online shop. I took photos of every piece I had made over the past year. I wrote descriptions. I set prices, trying to be fair but not undervalue my work. And then, with my heart pounding, I published the site. Nothing happened for the first week. No sales. No views. I told myself it did not matter, that I was doing this for me, not for validation. But every day I checked my shop, hoping. Then, on January 15th, I got my first order. A small bowl. $25. The buyer left a note. "This is beautiful. Thank you for making something so special." I stared at that note for 10 minutes. Someone I did not know, someone who had no obligation to be kind, had chosen my work and called it beautiful. I packed the bowl with shaking hands, wrapping it in layers of tissue paper, and drove it to the post office. When I dropped it in the mail, I felt something shift inside me. This was real. This was possible. Over the next few months, orders trickled in. Not many. Maybe 1 or 2 a week. But each one felt like validation. I used every dollar I made to buy better clay, better tools, better glazes. I invested in a small, second-hand kiln I found online. I turned the corner of my bedroom into a proper studio. I was building something. Slowly. Quietly. But it was mine. At work, my coworker Diane noticed a small vase on my desk that I was planning to photograph for my shop. "Did you make that?" she asked, picking it up carefully. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "It is for my online shop. I sell pottery." Diane turned the vase over in her hands, examining it closely. "Abby, this is really good. Like, really good. How much do you charge?" I told her the price. $30. She immediately pulled out her phone. "I am buying it right now. And I want 2 more for my sisters. Can you do custom orders?" I felt my face flush. Yes, absolutely. That was my first repeat customer. And it was someone who saw my work in person, who held it in her hands and decided it was worth buying. Not because she felt obligated, but because she genuinely liked it. That night, I worked on Diane's custom orders, and for the first time since the vase incident, I felt pure joy while creating. No sadness. No resentment. Just the quiet satisfaction of making something beautiful for someone who would appreciate it. By summer, I was selling regularly. Nothing huge. I was still working full-time at the planning office, making pottery in the evenings and weekends. But I had regular customers now. People who followed my shop, who left reviews, who told their friends. I was breaking even, sometimes making a small profit. I started dreaming bigger. What if I could do this full-time? What if I could turn this into a real career? My mother visited my apartment once that summer. I had not seen her much since Christmas. She walked in and immediately noticed my expanded studio setup. "What is all this clutter?" she asked, wrinkling her nose at my shelves of clay and glazes. It looks like a dirt factory in here. I took a breath. It is my pottery studio. I have been selling my work online. She laughed. Not meanly exactly, but dismissively. Oh, Abby, that is sweet. But you know you cannot make a real living from arts and crafts, right? This is fine as a hobby, but do not quit your day job. I did not argue with her. I just smiled and changed the subject. But inside, I made another promise to myself. I was going to prove her wrong. Not by telling her, by showing her. In September, something amazing happened. A local boutique owner named Sarah found my online shop. She messaged me asking if I did wholesale orders. She wanted 10 pieces for her holiday display. 10 pieces. That was more than I had ever sold at once. I said yes immediately, then panicked about whether I could actually deliver. I spent every spare moment for the next month working. I made bowls and vases and mugs, each one unique, each one perfect. I delivered them to Sarah's boutique on a Tuesday afternoon, and seeing my work displayed on her shelves, with little price tags and descriptions, made me want to cry. This was real. This was happening. Sarah sold 3 pieces in the first week, then 5 more. By the end of October, she had sold all 10 and wanted to order more. I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. That maybe I could be a real artist, not just someone with a silly hobby. And then, in early November, I got an email that changed everything. It was from a woman named Catherine Ellis. She introduced herself as an art curator for a regional gallery. She had found one of my pieces in Sarah's boutique and wanted to know if I would be interested in submitting work to a charity auction. I read Catherine's email 5 times, convinced it was spam or a mistake. But it was real. She explained that every year, her gallery hosted a New Artisans charity auction right before Christmas. They featured work from emerging artists, and all proceeds went to local arts education programs. She had seen my work at Sarah's boutique, bought a small bowl, and thought my style would be perfect for the auction. "Do you have a standout piece?" she asked. "Something that represents your best work?" The auction is high profile. We get serious collectors. My hands were shaking as I typed my response. Yes, I would love to participate. I had an idea for exactly what I would create. After I sent the email, I sat at my kitchen table and started sketching. I knew what I wanted to make. Something big. Something ambitious. Something that would show everyone, especially my mother, exactly what I was capable of. I planned a large, shallow bowl, almost 2 feet in diameter. I would carve intricate patterns into the surface, like frost spreading across a window. I would use a glaze that shifted from deep blue to silver, catching the light. It would be called First Frost. And it would be the best thing I had ever made. I spent every free moment working on that bowl. I threw it on the wheel 3 times before I got the shape perfect. Then came the carving. I worked late into the nights, my hands cramping, my eyes tired, but I could not stop. The patterns had to be perfect. Delicate lines radiating out from the center, like ice crystals forming. It took me 2 weeks just to finish the carving. Then came the glazing. I mixed custom colors, testing them on sample tiles until I got exactly the right combination. A deep midnight blue that faded to silver at the edges. When I finally loaded it into the kiln for the final firing, I barely slept. What if it cracked? What if the glaze ran wrong? What if I had worked this hard just to have it fail? But when I opened the kiln 2 days later, it was perfect. Better than perfect. It was stunning. The glaze had done exactly what I hoped, creating a gradient that looked like moonlight on ice. The carved patterns caught the light and threw delicate shadows. I carefully lifted it out of the kiln and set it on my work table. This was it. This was my best work. And I was about to show it to the world. The auction was scheduled for December 18th, exactly 1 week before Christmas. Catherine called me with the details. It would be held at the Grand Hotel Ballroom downtown, a fancy venue I had never been to. There would be about 200 guests, mostly collectors and art enthusiasts. The auction would feature 20 pieces from emerging artists, with mine included. Bring a guest if you would like, Catherine said. It is a wonderful opportunity to network. I thought about who I would invite. My coworker Diane would love it. Maybe Sarah from the boutique. And then, on impulse, I decided to invite my mother. I told myself it was not about revenge or proving anything. I just wanted her there. I wanted her to see what I had created. I called her and explained about the auction, trying to keep my voice casual. It is this charity event. I won a couple of tickets through work. Would you want to come? It is fancy. Black tie. My mother loved fancy events. Oh, that sounds lovely. What kind of auction? I hesitated. Art. Local artists. Should be interesting. I did not tell her my work would be featured. I wanted it to be a surprise. She agreed immediately. I will be there. This will be fun. The night of the auction arrived. I spent all day getting ready, trying on every dress I owned before settling on a simple black one that made me feel elegant without being flashy. I pulled my hair back, put on minimal makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked nervous. I felt terrified. My mother picked me up at 6. She was dressed impeccably, of course, in a designer gown I was sure cost more than my entire month's rent. You look nice, Abby, she said, glancing at my dress. Very understated. I was not sure if that was a compliment or not. We drove to the Grand Hotel, and my heart was pounding the entire way. My mother chattered about work and family gossip, completely oblivious to my anxiety. When we arrived, the ballroom was already filling with people. Waiters circulated with champagne. A string quartet played softly in the corner. And at the front of the room, on individual pedestals with spotlights, were the 20 pieces being auctioned, including my bowl. First Frost sat on a pedestal near the center, illuminated perfectly, the glaze shimmering under the lights. It looked even better than I remembered. My mother was looking around the room, not really paying attention to the art. Oh, this is lovely. What a nice event. I just nodded, unable to speak. We found our seats, and I tried to breathe normally. The auction started at 7. Catherine Ellis walked to the front of the room and took the microphone. She gave a brief speech about the importance of supporting emerging artists and arts education. Then the auction began. They started with smaller pieces. Prints, paintings, sculptures. Each one had a starting bid and went from there. Some pieces sold for a few $100s. Some for over $1,000. The crowd was engaged, excited. And then they got to piece number 14. My bowl. Our next piece, the auctioneer said, is First Frost by Abigail Morrison. This stunning ceramic bowl features hand-carved frost patterns and a custom gradient glaze. It is truly a one-of-a-kind work. They showed it on the large screens at the front of the room, the camera panning across the surface, catching every detail. I heard my mother gasp beside me. Abigail Morrison? That is you. You made that. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She stared at the screen, then at me, her mouth slightly open. You, when did you, how? The auctioneer's voice cut through. We will start the bidding at $100. A paddle went up immediately. 100. Then another. 200. My mother grabbed my arm. Abby, did you know this was in the auction? I nodded again. I made it for this. They invited me. The bidding kept climbing. 300. 500. 750. Each number felt surreal. People were bidding on my work. On something I made with my hands. $1,000, someone called from the back. My mother's grip on my arm tightened. The room was buzzing now. People were leaning forward, interested. 1,200. 1,500. 2,000. My heart was going to explode. $2,000. For something I made. The auctioneer looked around the room. 2,000 going once. 3,000, a new voice called. It was a woman I did not recognize, sitting near the front. The room reacted with murmurs. This was getting serious. 4,000, another bidder countered. My mother was staring at the screen at my bowl like she was seeing it for the first time. Maybe she was. 5,000. The numbers kept climbing. 6,000. 7,000. 8,000. I could not breathe. This could not be real. And then a man stood up near the back. I recognized him from photos. He was a famous interior designer, someone whose work appeared in magazines. $12,000, he said clearly. The room went silent. The auctioneer looked around, waiting. $12,000 for First Frost by Abigail Morrison. Do I hear 13? Nobody moved. The silence stretched out. 12,000 going once. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. 12,000 going twice. My mother was staring at me, her eyes wide, her mouth open. Sold. To paddle number 47 for $12,000. The room erupted in applause. People were clapping, standing, looking around to see who the artist was. Catherine was beaming, gesturing for me to stand. I stood on shaking legs and the applause got louder. People were smiling at me, nodding, congratulating me. $12,000. For my pottery. For my silly hobby. The interior designer who bought it came over after the auction. Your work is extraordinary, he said, shaking my hand. I have a client who will absolutely love this piece. Do you take commissions? I managed to say yes, to hand him my card, to have a conversation like a professional even though my brain was screaming. When he walked away, my mother was suddenly there, grabbing my hands. Abby, I had no idea. This is incredible. You are so talented. I always knew you had something special. I looked at my mother, at her excited face, at the pride suddenly shining in her eyes. Pride that had not been there when I gave her the vase. Pride that only appeared when other people validated my work with money. You always knew? I asked quietly. She nodded enthusiastically. Of course. I always supported your art. I just worried about you making a living, you know? But this is real. You are a real artist. I thought about the vase sitting on my kitchen table at home. The one she had hidden away and then regifted back to me. The one she called quaint. I thought about her calling my studio a clutter of dirt. I thought about every dismissive comment, every time she diminished my work, every time she made me feel small. Mom, I said, do you remember the vase I made you for Christmas 2 years ago? Her face flickered with uncertainty. The green one? Of course. I kept my voice steady. You regifted it back to me the next year. You said I would appreciate it more. She looked uncomfortable. Well, I just thought. I mean, it was very nice, but it was not really my style and... It was not your style, I repeated. But now, suddenly, because someone paid $12,000 for my work, you always supported my art. She started to respond, but I shook my head. It is okay, Mom. I do not need you to pretend now. The rest of the evening was a blur. People congratulated me. I exchanged cards with gallery owners and collectors. Catherine told me she wanted to feature my work in a group show next spring. My online shop got dozens of new orders overnight from people who had been at the auction. My life changed in one evening. But the best part was not the money or the recognition. It was the way I felt standing in that ballroom, holding my head high, knowing that I had created something valuable. Not because my mother finally approved, but because I believed in myself. The drive home with my mother was quiet. She tried to make conversation, talking about the auction, the people, the money. But I could tell she knew something had shifted between us. When she dropped me off at my apartment, she hugged me tightly. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not see it before, but I see it now." I hugged her back. "Thank you," I said. But I knew the apology was years too late. And that was okay. I did not need it anymore. I had already proven everything I needed to prove to myself. The check from the auction arrived a week later. $12,000 minus the gallery's commission. I stared at it for a long time before depositing it. That money represented so much more than just a sale. It represented validation, recognition, the death of my mother's voice in my head telling me this was just a hobby. I used part of the money to upgrade my studio. I bought a professional kiln, better tools, a proper pottery wheel. I turned my entire spare bedroom into a dedicated workspace. I used the rest to pay off my credit cards and build a savings account. For the first time in my life, I felt financially stable and creatively fulfilled at the same time. Orders kept coming in through my website. I was working every evening and all weekend, and I loved it. In January, I gave notice at the town planning office. My boss was surprised but supportive. "I always knew you had something special," he said. Funny how many people always knew once I had proof. By February, I was a full-time artist, working from home, making pottery, selling my work, living the life my mother had told me was impossible. That next Christmas, almost a year after the auction, my mother hosted again. Same decorations, same catered food, same performance. But this time, when the gift exchange started, I felt different, confident, secure. I brought my mother a gift. A small vase. Not as elaborate as the first one, but beautiful. Simple white glaze with subtle texture. I watched her unwrap it carefully. She lifted it out of the box, and this time, her reaction was different. "Abby, this is beautiful," she said. And she meant it. I could hear it in her voice. "I am going to put this right on my mantle. Everyone will see it." I smiled. "I hope you like it, Mom." She hugged me. "I love it. And I am so proud of you." Part of me wanted to be bitter, to point out that she only loved my work now because other people validated it first. But I was tired of being angry. I was tired of needing her approval. So I just hugged her back and let it go. After the gift exchange, I went home to my apartment. I walked into my studio, and there on a shelf, sitting among my newer pieces, was the original vase. The sea green one with the snowflakes. The one she had regifted back to me. I picked up that vase and held it carefully. I remembered the heartbreak I felt when she gave it back to me. The humiliation. The crushing feeling of being dismissed. But now, looking at it, I felt something different. Gratitude. Because that vase, that moment of rejection, was what pushed me to start my business. To prove myself. To build a career I loved. If my mother had kept it on her shelf and treasured it, I might never have felt the burning need to show the world what I could do. That regifting was the catalyst for everything that came after. The online shop. The boutique orders. The auction. My entire career. So I kept the vase. Not hidden away in a cupboard like my mother had done, but displayed proudly in my studio. A reminder. Not of hurt, but of transformation. Of how rejection can become fuel. Of how a silly hobby can become a purpose. I never told my mother this. She did not need to know. This was my story. My journey. My triumph. And that vase was the stone that started the avalanche. That Christmas evening, I sat in my studio with a cup of tea, looking at my work. Shelves full of pieces waiting to be fired. Orders to fulfill. Commissions to complete. A career I built from clay and determination. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. Another gallery wanted to feature my work. A magazine wanted to do an interview. A design firm wanted to order custom pieces for a hotel lobby. Opportunities one could not have imagined 2 years ago. I thought about my mother, and I realized I did not need her to understand my journey. I did not need her to apologize for dismissing my work or to pretend she had always believed in me. What mattered was that I believed in me, that I took the pain of that regifted vase and turned it into something beautiful, that I proved to myself more than anyone else that I was worth it. The regifted vase sat on its shelf, catching the light from my studio window, and I smiled, because that vase was not a symbol of rejection anymore. It was a trophy, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is not anger or confrontation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you could not be, and then exceeding even your own expectations. I picked up a ball of clay and started to work. I had more pieces to create, more beauty to bring into the world. And this time, I was doing it entirely for myself.